Well, hello everyone. Today I have a video. It's a little bit off the beaten path, and depending on if you watch it on the Rumble or the Redneck channel or the Real Estate channel, depends on which little advert, little prompts that I might stick in here immediately after the introduction. But what it's on is espresso machines, the kit. If you know nothing about it, this is a good place to start, because then you can go with a little bit of base information. You can have an idea of what you might want to look to buy. Do you really need it? Does this really make any sense? Is it just coffee snobbery? Is there some real science to it? That kind of thing. And that's really kind of what I'm doing. I'm not really trying to pass judgment on anything. I'm just trying to give you some of the questions that I had to have when I recently got back into doing espresso, because I haven't done espresso for decades, since I quit traveling. And my first actual espresso shot was in Italy, Gallarate, Italy, and it was good, and I liked it. But then I came back, and the gear I had wasn't particularly good, and I got irritated with it, and it finally went into the dumpster, and I haven't touched it since, until just recently I had another shot at it, and I thought, boy, this is really bad. I think I can do better than that, and that's what I'm going to get at. So I just recently did some research, some cursory stuff, but I think this will be good for you if you have the patience to sit through. The very first video clip is a little bit long. It's 4 minutes or so. The rest of them are about less than 2 to 3 minutes. So, and I'll come back and put a little comment in between there. So let's get started. All right, now this first video clip is the longest of them, I think, and it is on the baskets, because there's a lot of confusion about what is the difference in the basket. Is there any difference in the basket? Is one better at one point in time for one function over another one? And anyway, let's roll that film. Well, let's get started with, I think, the basic of espresso making, which is going to be the basket, and what each one of these type of baskets is good for and not as good for, depending on the purpose. This, as it indicates, is a double wall basket, and I think it's best and geared for pre-ground type of espresso powders. The reason I say this is because this says right there on it, double wall, and if I turn it over, you can see it has another wall pressed into it, press fit, that has all the holes in it to do the basket, the straining part of it. But all of the water has to come through a single tiny hole, and I don't know if I can get up here where you can see it or not, but it's right there in the middle, a single hole. And it's going to have an effect, I think, on the volume of water delivered. So if you're using pre-ground coffees and you have a machine that is built for this, the timing and the pump pressures and all are set up by the people who made the machine to use that type of pre-ground powder. Now the pre-ground powder, when you use it, is going to be off-gassed, because you've already ground it into tiny little pieces, and there's really no way to keep that gas in there. And so to make up for the lack of CO2 in the beans, the natural gases that are in the beans, it forces it all through that little tiny hole, which makes kind of, some people call it a fake crema. It's not, it's still a crema, I guess, but it's just going to be a little bit different, because you don't get the assistance of the gas in the beans, like the freshest of beans. And so that's, I think, what this is geared for. But because all the water has to go through one hole, it's going to have a different timing and pump type of profile to go through there. Now this is the second basket style that came with the little Breville unit that I have, and it's an open basket. It's a single wall basket. It's got all those little holes in it, and they go through. If you hold it up to sunlight, you can probably see from where I take it on to the Formica, you can see that little bit of dark. You can see through it. And so it's probably, if you put this basket in this unit where this one was, you'll probably get more volume out of it, simply because it's got a lot more holes and a lot less resistance. Now, both of these two over here are what we call a rimmed basket. See how it's got that little flat spot? That's where the little spring in the portafilter catches the basket and keeps it from falling out. But see, this has a taper to it, and that's like a Jello mold. The coffee puck that comes out of it will probably come out much easier. The downside I see to this type of tapered basket, although it's good for knocking the puck out when you're finished with your brew, the downside is it has fewer holes than, say, this basket, which is a straight wall basket or a rimless basket. And again, it's going to pose a little bit less pressure on this one, possibly, than that one, to a degree. But because also it is tapered, the same dose is going to be a little bit thicker. So you might get a little different behavior out of it. Now this one, I find, being a straight wall basket, essentially until the very, very end, is going to tamp, I think, a little bit better, simply because my tamper is going to be about the size of the top part, and it will go deeper into the basket before it binds against the walls, compared to that basket, which on a very light dose, I might feel like I'm tamping hard, but I may not actually be compressing the spacing out of the grounds inside of that basket, if that makes sense. Plus, when you talk about timing, it's the puck that then is creating most of the back pressure on it. So these two I would expect to run a little bit more water through the puck, all things being considered, than this one right here. So depends on your coffee, how it's ground, and how you tamp it and all that, and each one of them has a little different characteristic to it. Well, now that that's done, if you're still with me, if you haven't turned me off, I think my point I'm making is the type of coffee you have may make it, if you're using just pre-ground, you're not going to spring for a grinder and you're getting only pre-ground, you might want to use that double wall cup. And you might find that if you don't have a very expensive machine starting off, if you have the very super basic that you can get for 100, 150 bucks, 200 bucks on Amazon, then you might find out you're limited and you have to use it because you can't adjust the water shot, how long the water runs. And so it's set up to run kind of with that pressure based upon that cup, that basket. The other one is a rimless versus the non-rimless, and I think the rimmed baskets are fine. I just have a little bit of trouble using a wider range of dosage, trying to tweak something out, find out if I'm going the right direction. So that's all that's about. Let's see, what's my next video on? It's less than 2 minutes. It's just on filter paper, the screens, and of course the shape of the puck, and it kind of relates back to that basket one we just looked at. Now I have a little saucer here, a little sandwich plate with a couple of different pucks that have been obviously brewed. The one that's turning kind of light brown is drying out. It's the oldest. It's getting a little crispy. And you can see the one in the back where it's still wet in the middle. It's kind of drying out on the edges. And you see one with a piece of paper on it, filter paper. And the main purpose I would think the filter paper does, if you put it on the bottom, it helps catch the fines, just like you would a regular drip coffee. And if you put it on the top, it keeps maybe the grounds from exploding back through the shower head or the coffee machine itself. Now if I take it down to the edge, you see that's one that I brewed with that tapered cup, that tapered basket, and the rest of them are not. So all things considered, you might get a smaller, thinner puck out of a non-tapered basket than one with a taper or a rimmed basket. And again, we have one more piece here that you may or may not be interested in. It's a screen. And screens, I don't know, pose a lot to the pressure profile of the pump and the timing and the flow, but some people believe it works a little bit like refining the shower head's flow of water across the puck of coffee. Maybe it does that, maybe it doesn't, because again, as soon as it comes out of those holes, it's pressurized because of the basket itself, and I don't know that it makes that big a difference, but it does help keep your coffee grounds from exploding back up through the puck at the end of the cycle into the head of the unit. Well, now that we got that little short clip out, the basket might actually make you have to look at your portafilter. And what are the differences in the portafilters? We'll look at those right now. Now here are the portafilters. I've got two different styles here. This one they call a bottomless because it has no bottom, it's just straight through. And this one has the diffuser built into it. And if I flip it over, you can see it actually has a mechanism to cause the coffee to go out through each of the two ports. And the idea is, if everything is perfect and equal, you'll have one shot going through one hole, one shot going through the other. In real life, I haven't really observed that that's all that well defined. It's just not all that practical, a lot of sense. And very few people pull single shots two at a time. So even if you have a single basket in here, it's still going to try to split it between those two holes. And I don't know that that's all that important. It does have a spring at the top to catch the rim, to keep the basket in there. And this one doesn't. It has, of course, this is the top, so you can see the spring, but it comes out the bottom unimpeded, so you can see it better. And for people who are trying to diagnose their dose or get their tamp just right and cut down on channeling, that type of thing, you can normally see it a little better if you can see it coming out of the basket itself to see if you have any spots that are not flowing and others that are flowing too hard. It just gives you a little bit better idea. And so your coffee aficionados, what I would call a coffee nerd, your coffee people, are going to probably prefer something like this because they can see it. Also, you get the idea how it behaves. Does it come up and does it consolidate to a single stream? You can see about when it starts to turn yellow, where it's actually doing a better extraction, that type of thing. That's kind of why people like to have these. They're not necessarily needed in most cases unless your basket physically won't fit in this one because of the plastic in there. You may not be able to get that straight wall basket in there. And again, this one was made, this is an OEM basket, and it's made for those little tapered baskets. And I assume some of it is so that it can get around that edge of that plastic and fit deeper into the portafilter. So that's something you might run into. But that's the reason why somebody might want one of these, is because there's nothing to obstruct it. It's just the basket, and you can kind of watch how the coffee flows.
If you like this content, please go to calldeltosell.com, find the tab that says on YouTube, click it, and it'll open up a page of QR codes. There you can use a smartphone to scan and get to the YouTube page, or you can just mouse over and click it on a PC. There you'll be able to subscribe to this little button over here and click the notification bell so that YouTube will notify you. Thank you. Now that I got that portafilter, there's something I don't know if I really made clear. You know, I don't particularly like the two-spouted version simply because I never pull a single shot, so I don't really need to pull two single shots in a double. And it can be a little bit hard for me with my glassware to actually capture both streams coming out of the two, and they rarely are exactly balanced anyway, even though theoretically they should be. I don't normally see them pulled exactly even anyway, but that was one thing, and I really wanted to get rid of that problem I had not being able to tamp a low dose, because maybe a low dose is what tastes good to me, and if I can't get my puck prep done right, it was just a little bit aggravating, so I got the bottomless. And the purpose of the bottomless, a lot of people will tell you, is they just want to see the development of the espresso coming out. A downside to it is it will spit at you from time to time, and the others, I'm sure, do. The closed bottoms will spurt at you too, but you'll never see it because it's captured within the bottom of that cup in that portafilter. Whereas if you have a bottomless, I think it can tend to be a little bit more messy, but it's your coffee. Deal with it if you want to, or don't deal with it. It's up to you. I would prefer seeing it so I can see, you know, maybe I'm not getting a good tamp and I'm getting a black spot where I'm not flowing good, or maybe I get a little spurt and I may be a little bit light on that area. It just gives me an idea how quickly it coalesces into a single stream and drips down. And it's just easier for me to hit my glassware. So I like that for that purpose. Also, I needed that to take the 18 to 22 gram basket, because in my mind, I thought it was important to hit an espresso that hit pretty well much the 2-to-1 ratio. Now, if you're going to do the ristretto, if I pronounce that correctly, coffee snobs, correct me if I got it wrong, but that just means restricted. So that's less water, like a half shot, less water, coffee, and then you have the long shot, which is more water and a longer shot. So depending on the volumes, I'm trying to hit that middle ground that most people tend to agree is a, quote, American shot. So that's that video. Now, what do we have up next? Okay, on the tamper itself, do you really need to spend a lot of money on a tamper? Well, take a look.
All they're for is to push the air out of the coffee so you don't get the channeling out of it. But let's go back to one of these tapered baskets. Here's one of those tapered baskets. See how it's shaped? All right, now I don't think I can do this very well one-handed, so you might just have to bear with me. What I said I don't like about a tapered wall versus a straight wall, or this rimmed basket, is if I have a light dose in a tamp, I'm going to bind against the coffee, or I can bind against the walls, and it's hard for me to know. And if I have a light dose, I might get some inconsistency and not really know that I'm not packing that puck very well. And the metal one is just the same thing. It's a little bit bigger. It doesn't go down as deep. And so unless I have a very full puck here, I'm not going to be able to get that tamper to go in. Now let me pull that straight wall over here, and let's compare it. And I think these are probably a little bit better for diagnosis. And it gives you a little bit better ability to know that your puck treatment, your work is done correctly. Now watch when I take this. See, I'm able to go much further in, which would tell me that I can probably get a smaller dose in that straight wall basket and still get it tamped properly just by using that style of basket. And this one is the double wall. But the other is just the same way because it still has that kind of jello mold shape to it for easy extraction. So it's good for knocking the puck out, but I have the same problem. Does that make sense to you? So it's going to be, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul in some respects. This one is going to be easier to get a better pack out of it, better tamping, and this one is going to be better at knocking the used coffee out of it.
Well, that's probably, I mean, I don't know how you spend a little bit of that much time on a tamper. There are a little bit of differences. Some of them, they will actually have a different type of distribution that they use, and I'll show you my distributor that I use right now. So here is my distribution tool. Quite honestly, it's a whiskey cork, and some dowel needles, some little 3-inch dowel needles, I think these are, and I just use it to knock the clumps out. Although my grinder is not producing a lot of clumps, so I don't really know that this is particularly necessary, but I play with it. And in distributors, which I didn't cover, there are some that are wedge distributors. They just have a little ramp and they use it to smooth your coffee down. I think some of the stuff you need to watch out for, maybe not just go gung-ho with everything that you see somebody say they like or they need. I don't know. I would like to go a little bit at a time and see what I can get going with it. So what else we got going now that we hit that? Next little video I will show you, it's only about a minute or so, close to 2. It's on funnels. Now I do like my little funnel, and all that's for is to help the coffee grounds go directly into the portafilter basket when I'm not weighing them. And only time I weigh my shots is when I'm trying to really test them and find out if I get my 2-to-1 ratio. So that's about all I need. For once I get my grinder doing it, I don't mess with that. Quite honestly, and you might not want to either. I have a little video, and here is it regarding the little funnel.
Now let's speak briefly on these guys. These are dosing funnels, I think is what they're called. And of course this one is a smaller one, so that's for the 51 millimeter portafilters. And these two plastic ones came with the grinder, and they work to a degree. This one's for the 58. This happens to be, since it's a Breville, a 54 millimeter portafilter. And so these don't really fit it directly. This is too small. See, and it'll fit in there to dose, but it's too loose. And of course the 58 then is just too big to fit on the edges. So I went with an aftermarket. Now this happens to be stainless. It doesn't have to be, but this one is. They make them also in aluminum. And this one is designed to fit directly on top of the portafilter. But it allows you to do something else. After you do your distribution, whether you use a wedge or the wire type, you'll find that, let me grab this. You'll find that your tamper with this particular style, you can actually tamp. So it's wider to catch more coffee grounds, but it also works perfectly to allow you to tamp through that without spilling your coffee grounds.
Now the next little clip is on weighing the dose, and there's a lot to be said about dosing, and I talked about that straight-walled basket. And if you really want to test the effective dose on it, I would say pull what you think is your right shot, and then pull a couple grams over and a couple grams under. Pull each one of them into your little glassware and put them to the side, keep them in order, and then try them and see what effect that actual dosing has on it. You can do the same thing with a grind if you want. If you think, well, am I grinding too fine? Am I grinding too coarse? Here's what I observed, and it falls in with what people have been saying on the grind itself. If you don't extract enough, the first bit that comes off of the coffee when it first comes out super black tends to be a little bit more sour. I think it's just what it drives off of the beans, the surface of the grounds. And then as it goes late, it starts to get more bitter because I think it's already taken all of the sour off. It's taken the mid parts off. Now it's on the tail end where there's still some of that bitter left in your grounds. And so you get an idea of what you can do there. Now, if you grind it finer, obviously it's going to release a little bit more. So you might, if you have a real fine grind, it might turn out to be a little bit more bitter than you like. And if you don't grind it enough, it may be a little bit more sour. But both of those are going to have an input on your flow. And my little machine, I can actually train it to run so many seconds before it cuts off. It's all on time. It's not really pressure per se, but it's just kind of, I can stop it short or long, because the theory is if I continue to run water through grounds that's been fully extracted and I tend to over extract them, I might get a bad tasting shot.
If you're trying to dial in your shot, I suggest you use a scale so you know what dose you're actually having, and it needs a little set of scales. Now this is a set, I don't even know if this is available anymore. I bought this years ago for doing my starter cultures and the salts and the spices, to be very exact with that. It's a very small thing. But I can put this, because it's small enough, under my grinder and put my little ceramic dish here and then weigh my dose and transfer it in over here. Once I get it set, the grind size and the actual time, because my grinder works just strictly off of time, how long the little burrs spin around, this helps me get an idea of how much coffee I'm putting in there, so that later when I weigh the little glass as I run the water through, I can tell about what ratio I have. But you can certainly take this and then dump it into the head. Now once I get my timing and my grind size established, then I can just take this and put this directly under the grinder as it runs and get it to distribute the powder, the grounds, in the basket fairly uniform to start with before I kind of tap it down. Let's just do one more since we saw exactly what that particular shot weighed before I dumped it in there. Plus, I want to see if without tamping it, trying to do it one-handed, if it looks any prettier. Let's give it a shot. I can drink more coffee. Looks like I got a little flaw in my tamp. Well, just went away. Just went away. Let's see how it turns out. Looks pretty uniform. There's not a lot of what we call that tiger stripe and stuff in that right there. We'll have to see how much the final drip runs out. So 19.5 times 2 is what? Is that right? 39? What does that say right there? 39. How about that? If you just don't know much about espresso right now, watch this video first, share it with your friends if they're thinking about getting them, and then go watch all the coffee experts and the people, because there's thousands of hours of that. A lot of it's being produced by people selling coffee, and so they want you to keep coming back, and they keep talking about stuff and pay attention to the dates that the videos were shot and how much information is. Like I say, I'm not dogging any particular bit or piece of it. I don't have a very fancy machine, but I can adjust not the water temperature, but the amount of water it shoots, and I think that was important enough to go up a little bit over some of the absolute bare minimums. I don't drink milk drinks, so I'm not going to go into latte art or the wands or all that kind of stuff. That could be a separate video.